Close your eyes and take a deep breath. Today I invite you into a legend from ancient Cyprus, where the sea carried the scent of salt through white stone streets, and the temples of Aphrodite watched over every prayer, every promise, and every longing heart. There lived a sculptor named Pygmalion, a man whose hands could draw beauty from stone, yet whose heart had turned away from the living world. He had seen too much pride, too much false desire, and too many empty promises hidden behind beautiful faces. So he chose silence over love, ivory over flesh, and art over the uncertainty of human affection. But sometimes the heart creates the very thing it fears most. And in the stillness of his workshop, beneath the glow of oil lamps and the dust of his own obsession, Pygmalion began to carve a woman unlike any he had ever known. At first, she was only ivory, cold, silent, flawless, and unreachable. Yet the more Pygmalion shaped her face, her hands, and the delicate stillness of her form, the more something inside him began to change. He thought he was creating perfection, but perhaps the statue was slowly carving him as well. Night after night he spoke to her as if silence could answer him. He gave her flowers, jewels, and a name, Galatea. But what happens when a dream refuses to remain a dream? What happens when a man asks the goddess of love to give life to the woman he made with his own hands? And if she opens her eyes, will she become his reward? Or will she become the first person who teaches him what love truly means? Before we begin this epic, I have a small request that means a lot to me. Please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. The greatest reward for all the effort I put into creating these epics is your support through subscribing to my channel. If you enjoy my content and want me to continue creating more, your subscription and like truly give me great motivation. Also, don't forget to share your thoughts with me in the comments. Your comments not only encourage me, but also help me understand what kind of epics and stories you would like to see on this channel. Thank you so much in advance for your support. Take a deep breath, relax your mind, and let the rhythm of this ancient legend guide you, wishing you a peaceful sleep. The epic of He Fell in Love with the Woman He Carved, a Pygmalion and Galatea story begins now. The morning in Cyprus opened with a thin smell of salt from the sea. The road to the temple was not crowded yet. Fishermen were loosening their nets, potters were opening the lids of their ovens, and women on their way to the fountain covered the mouths of their jars with cloth. Pygmalion saw all this waking life less as a human city than as a great relief that had not yet been finished. His eyes went more to lines than to faces, and more to posture than to words. In quick human smiles he sensed promises that would one day break. In carefully tied hair he saw order ready to come loose. Stone seemed more honest to him. It did not try to seem greater than it was, and it did not deny a hidden crack forever. As he walked to his workshop that morning, he saw the light from the sea touch the temple columns, and a familiar thought moved inside him. Beauty existed, but when people touched it, its meaning grew smaller. His workshop stood on the upper slope of the city, around a courtyard that took the wind directly. Anyone who entered first saw unfinished faces, clay studies, wax models, and measuring cords hanging on the walls. For Pygmalion, this was not only a place of work. It was the last shelter where the noise of the world outside could not enter unless it was turned into form. His young apprentice, Mimos, brought the morning water with his usual care, but the ring of the jar touched the stone floor and made a small sound. Pygmalion did not lift his head, yet Mimos knew he had heard it. His dark work tunic hung loosely from his shoulders, and his hair had fallen over his forehead with the look of a man who had not slept in days. But his eyes were not tired, they were too awake. During the night, he had wiped away the face on the wax model before him. Only an empty oval remained. Minos looked at that blank space and felt a chill. It seemed as if his master had not only erased a face, but also the last trust he had in human faces. Toward noon, Damas arrived. The old stone master entered the courtyard with his sun-hardened face and heavy steps, and the air of the workshop changed. He was the man who had taught Pygmalion to hold his first chisel years ago. Now the student's fame had long passed the teacher's, but an unnamed respect still stood between them. Damas had brought 3 fresh blocks of marble. One had thin veins, one was almost white as milk, and the last had the noble weight of something fit for a temple niche. Pygmalion touched each one, but he did not stay with any of them for long. Damas noticed and said, "You used to persuade the stone." Without wiping the dust from his fingers, Pygmalion answered, "I also used to be persuaded more easily." The sentence was not truly about material. Damas saw that his student had begun to close his ears not only to stone, but also to people and their desires. That same day, 2 noblewomen came to the workshop. Servants carried scented oils beside them, and young slaves held a shaded cloth over their heads. The older woman asked for a statue of a water nymph for the family garden. The face was to resemble the younger woman beside her, but it was to be calmer, more graceful, and more perfect. The young woman smiled when she heard this. Pygmalion saw grace in that smile, but also the wish to see herself confirmed. What they wanted was not a statue. It was a harder shell for human pride. When they left, they placed a bright purse on the table. Minos looked at it. The payment was truly generous. Pygmalion pushed it to the shelf without opening it. "They did not ask for a water nymph," he said. "They wanted even water to approve of them." Minos found that harsh. To Pygmalion, every wish was a small sign of a larger sickness, the sickness of turning beauty into a mirror for the self. In the late afternoon, Thalia came. The priestess of Aphrodite appeared at the door in plain linen, with a calm gaze, and Pygmalion did not receive her as he received ordinary clients. Thalia said that the temple wanted a new statue for the empty niche beside the old altar. It would not be made for the pride of a family or the wealth of a merchant. It would stand before the goddess to remind people of a meaning they had forgotten. Pygmalion took the tablet in his hand, but he did not open it. Even the temple's request no longer seemed wholly separate from the city's wishes. People brought flowers to the altar, then used the same mouths for gossip. They swore in the name of love, then turned desire into a bargain. Thalia saw the resistance in his face and said softly, "Sometimes stone says what people do not want to hear more calmly." Pygmalion's answer was brief. "Then find another stone." Those words did not only refuse a commission, they also closed the path that had opened toward the goddess. Thalia was not angry. She walked slowly through the workshop and looked at the uncovered half-faces, the empty eye sockets, and the wiped wax model. "Aphrodite knows how to wait," she said, "but some waiting changes the one who waits." Pygmalion did not answer. The priestess did not take back the tablet. She left it on the table and turned toward the door. Minos stood uncertainly by the entrance, frightened that his master had rejected such a request. Damas too looked at Pygmalion for a long time with his old eyes. "One day you will accept no commissions at all," he said. "I wonder what you will carve then." That unfinished warning echoed inside Pygmalion. Not for another person's face, prayer, pride, or fear, for the form hidden only inside himself. The thought was frightening, but it also drew him in. As the workshop sank into evening, Pygmalion turned back to the wax plate on the table. There was still no face. There was only a faint pull at the very edge of emptiness. He was no longer only fleeing. He had begun to seek a shape for his flight. When night fell, Minos had put the tools away, Damas had left, and Thalea's footsteps had faded on the temple road. Pygmalion was alone. He lit only 2 lamps. He did not want too much light. He looked at the wax plate beside the sealed temple tablet and took a small modeling knife. He now knew he wanted no face taken from people. To join one woman's smile, another's eyes, and a third woman's neck into one form felt to him like deception, not art. The form hidden inside him was not visible yet, but because it was not visible, it had not been spoiled. With that thought, he brought his hand close to the wax. He paused before drawing the first line. Outside, the night of Cyprus shone faintly with the distant lights of the temple. Inside Pygmalion, a harder and lonelier light had been lit. When the line finally touched the wax, it was not the beginning of a face. It was the first border of a desire that was moving away from human beings. Galatea had no name yet, but the waiting already had weight. When Minos woke in the morning, he thought his master had worked almost without moving through the night. But when he came closer to the table, he saw only a few thin lines. There was no face, no body, only something approaching while still hiding itself. Pygmalion stood before the window, listening to the sounds coming from the temple road. The city had awakened for the procession dedicated to Aphrodite. Wreath makers carried myrtle branches. Children ran around baskets filled with rose petals. Temple helpers polished the incense bowls. Soon Thalea's messenger came and called Pygmalion to witness the procession. He wanted to refuse at once, because going to the temple meant moving again toward a door he had closed the day before. But the call carried something that could not be dismissed as easily as a statue commission. Minos walked behind him and saw the tension in his shoulders. He was going to a square that would either confirm or break his judgment. The temple road was full. Flutes held a thin melody. Incense curled through the sunlight, and people carried their offerings with both hope and calculation on their faces. As Pygmalion moved through the crowd, he did not feel like one of them. He felt like a cold witness standing outside them. Thalea met him in the outer court of the temple. Her simple clothing was almost lost among the colors of the crowd, but her posture carried a stillness that quieted the noise around her. "Look from here," she said. Pygmalion climbed beside the columns and saw the square from above. Sailors, widows, young girls, old mothers, merchants, and strangers had gathered before the same goddess. Thalia said, "If you search for beauty only in silence, you will never hear the pleading inside the crowd." Pygmalion did not answer. His eyes did not go to the prayers of the crowd, but to the changing desires behind those prayers. Everyone seemed to want love, but many wanted not love itself, only the comfort it might bring them. As the procession moved forward, Pygmalion's eyes fell on a group of women standing near the edge of the square. They seemed to be part of the ceremony, but their faces carried amusement rather than respect. With gold-threaded veils, scented hair, and easy laughter, they drew eyes toward themselves. They examined the gifts brought to the altar and the people who prayed. One of them spoke the name of Aphrodite in a mocking whisper and compared love to a trade whose price had to be known. Another copied the hymn of the priestesses and twisted it into a thin, mocking tune. The laughter lasted only a moment, but it scratched Pygmalion's ear like a sharp tool across metal. People in the city rarely spoke their names aloud, but everyone knew the Propoetides, women who made light of the goddess and had begun to lose the power of shame. Until that day, Pygmalion had treated those stories as rumors. Now, in their laughter, he saw an emptiness that turned the sacred into a small toy. For him, this was not only disrespect, it was beauty torn from its heart and dragged into the marketplace. One of the women took a silver mirror that had been left near the altar and turned it not toward her own face, but toward the eyes watching her. Then something happened. Her smile froze. The color left her face, and the movement in her neck became heavy. No one screamed. No one openly showed fear. Yet a fine shiver passed through the square. The woman beside her touched her arm, then quickly pulled her hand back, as if she had not found the warmth that should have been in living skin. Pygmalion saw the small change, and his judgment hardened inside him. A body that lost shame, he thought, moved at last toward the cold silence of stone. The old shadow told by poets seemed to leave common rumor and fall, thin but clear before his eyes. But the moment did not lead him toward divine justice. It led him deeper into mistrust of human beings. In the faces of the Propoetides, he did not see only the fall of a few women. He saw the fate of living beauty itself open to decay. A weak voice inside him said that this was not the whole truth. His fear was stronger. Thalia led him to a shaded side gallery. The sound of the crowd came through the columns like a low wave. The priestess had seen the hardness in Pygmalion's face, but she chose not to accuse him. "What you saw is not the face of all women," she said. "If you spread one shadow over everyone, your own eyes will darken." Pygmalion answered, "One crack changes the whole marble." Thalia lowered her head slightly. "A person is not marble. Sometimes a crack is not a break. Sometimes it is where breath enters." The words entered him, but they did not soften him. "How can something that changes be loved?" he asked. Her reply was quieter. "What does not change is not loved. It is only protected. Love is more dangerous than protection because it asks you to let the thing you love live apart from you." The sentence touched a future he had not yet named. He said he had imprisoned no one. Thalia only answered, "Not yet." Those two words were heavier than a long accusation. When Pygmalion left the gallery, the festival was still going on. But for him, the ceremony had already ended. The colors in the square looked too bright, the music too decorated, the prayers too calculated. A young girl gave a comb and prayed for a man she loved to return. An old woman prayed for her grandson's marriage. On another day, he might have seen the fragile heart inside such wishes. Now he found each one incomplete and selfish. Mimos nearly ran to keep up with him. "Master, did the priestess anger you?" he asked. Without stopping, Pygmalion said, "No one can anger me." It was not true. They came down through narrow streets, and the sound of the festival fell behind them. Yet the frozen look of the Propoetides stayed in his mind. The workshop door no longer seemed like a workplace. It seemed like the last shelter into which he could withdraw from the world. As soon as he entered, he turned toward the human studies lined along the wall. These were small clay faces and figures that had been shaped over the years from noble women, priestesses, dancers, and brides. Some had only a hand finished, some only a head, some a body caught in the middle of walking. Pygmalion had once looked at them as possibilities. Now each seemed like a witness carrying the error of the world outside. He took the first cloth and lowered it over the nearest face. Minos almost objected, because he had grown up among those studies. But there was no anger in Pygmalion's movements, and that made them more frightening. "No living model will enter this door again," he said. Then he stood before the wax plate. "I will not carve from nature. I will carve from what is hidden inside me." As the covered figures threw shapeless shadows on the walls, he saw that Pygmalion had begun to build a new world to protect himself from people. In the first hours of morning, the workshop was full of the silence of covered studies. Pygmalion put away the old measuring cords, the wooden sticks that showed facial proportions, and the small clay casts taken from different models. Minos knew this was not simple order. His master broke nothing, but he was doing something even more final than breaking. He was removing every human face from the space of his work. "No face will come from outside now," Pygmalion said. His voice did not rise, yet it was as firm as a locked door. Then he opened the notebooks where he kept his records of materials. They listed which stone came from which quarry, which marble darkened in rain, and which could not bear fine detail. But that morning no record was enough. The material he sought must not be only white or strong. It had to hold the silence of a being not yet born. It had to feel not like the cold of a tomb, but like waiting. He could not put this into clear words, but as his fingers moved over the pages, Minos sensed that he was no longer searching for material. He was searching for fate. Damas arrived toward noon with 2 workers. They lowered a great block of marble into the courtyard, and it struck the ground with a deep, heavy sound. The old master had the linen covering removed. The stone was pale, with thin grey veins moving through it. Another artist could have made from it a grand goddess, a mourning queen, or a guardian figure for a city gate. Pygmalion knelt and placed his palm on the surface. He waited for a long time. Damas said, "I saved this for you. The vein lies deep, and the cracks are few." Minos looked at the block with admiration. Its brightness was impressive, but when Pygmalion drew back his hand, the expected light was not in his face. "This material does not look like the body of a goddess," he said. "It looks like an empty tomb prepared for one." Damas was hurt, though he hid his anger. "Marble learns the warmth of the hand as it is worked," he warned. Pygmalion shook his head. "This stone is empty. I am not looking for emptiness. I am looking for a hidden breath." Everyone in the courtyard fell silent. They were no longer speaking about a block. They were speaking about a being that had not yet been named. As the marble was wrapped again, a messenger came from the harbor. A Phoenician merchant, he said, had brought with him an old piece of ivory, once set aside for the temple. Pygmalion first seemed uninterested. Ivory was fit for small ornaments, comb handles, and delicate reliefs, not for a full human figure. But when the messenger said the piece was not ordinary, that it had come from far seas, had been stored a long time in chests, and had a whiteness closer to moonlight than milk. Pygmalion's gaze changed. Damas objected at once. "Ivory is difficult," he said. "It is not as patient as marble." Pygmalion murmured, "Perhaps that is exactly what I need." Until then, he had thought of strength when choosing material. Now he felt drawn by a softer, more hidden possibility. Mimos offered to go down to the harbor. Pygmalion agreed. For the first time that day, the workshop opened again to the world outside. But the connection did not come through a customer, a priestess, or a city wish. It came through the unknown call of matter itself. The harbor was still busy with the last waves of the festival crowd. Colored sails hung loose from masts, and the smell of spices, cloth, wine, and foreign wood rose from the storage houses. The Phoenician merchant was old, but his eyes were quick. He had perfumed oil in his beard and dark cords tied around his wrists. When he saw Pygmalion, he did not begin by praising his goods. Instead, he led him to the shaded side of the ship and had a long chest opened. Inside lay the large piece of ivory wrapped in thick linen. When the cloth was pulled back, Pygmalion said nothing. Its whiteness was not cold like marble. It was softer, deeper, as if it took in light and returned it slowly. When he placed his fingers on the surface, he did not feel the resistance of stone. He felt something like the memory of hidden skin. The feeling frightened him. The merchant said, "I will ask a high price for this." Pygmalion barely heard him. For the first time, he thought the material itself might be looking back at him. Damas studied the ivory and his face darkened. "This will test you," he said. "Even if it does not crack, it will lead you into impatience. Marble does not forgive a mistake. Ivory hides it, then gives it back when you least expect it." Pygmalion did not ignore the warning. The bargain with the merchant was brief. Pygmalion gave the sealed purse left for the temple commission and silver from several old commissions. Mimos was troubled when he saw this payment. His master was not only buying costly material, he was investing the safe earnings of his old life in an unknown white mass. When the ivory was lifted from the chest and placed on the cart, several people in the harbor turned to look. But as the cart returned to the workshop, the city no longer seemed as loud to him. His eyes were not on the road. They were on the white form beneath the cloth. When they reached the workshop, the ivory was lowered into the center of the courtyard. Damas did not leave. The old master saw in Pygmalion's approach to this material a dangerous reverence. Mimos prepared the lamps, cleaned the floor, and arranged the tools on fresh cloths. Pygmalion touched none of them at first. He had all the covered human studies moved into the back room. When the middle of the workshop was empty, the ivory became more present. He approached it not like a master seeking a flaw, but like someone listening at a closed door. "I will not make you," he said very softly. "If you are there, I will only bring you out." Mimos heard the words and did not know what to say. Damas stood in the doorway frowning. If a man believed he had only found his work, not created it, could he free himself from responsibility? Damas did not say this aloud. Pygmalion was now listening not to warnings from outside, but to the silent place inside the ivory. Toward midnight, only 3 lamps remained in the workshop. Damas had gone and Mimos had given in to sleep in the back room. Pygmalion stood alone before the ivory. He held his finest chisel, but he did not hurry to strike. The same hands that had covered the human faces the day before now trembled, before this white surface that had no face yet. He had turned away from marble because it reminded him of a grave. He had turned away from living models because they carried the fear of change. Ivory seemed to stand between the two. It was lifeless but not wholly dead, hard but not closed to light, silent but not empty. For the first time, Pygmalion sensed that the perfection he wanted might not come from rejecting the world outside, but from giving shape to the fear inside himself. The thought did not stop him. The chisel touched the surface. The first blow made a small, almost shy sound. It did not disappear. It passed through the covered past, the closed doors and the waiting fate, and it drew the edge of a new beginning. After the first blow, Pygmalion stopped counting the days. The workshop windows opened in the morning and closed at night. Minos brought food, the lamps were cleaned, and the tools were set in order. But all these things flowed around Pygmalion like a distant life. He was no longer only a craftsman before the ivory. He was the patient guard of a hidden face. He did not search first for the broad outline of the body, but for the tilt of the head. To him, the face was not a sign placed upon the body. It was the place where the whole being began. As he opened the line of the forehead, he pulled his hand back many times. The smallest excess might disturb the balance of the gaze that had not yet been born. Minos often saw him stare at the same point for hours. There was fear in that look, more than tiredness. Pygmalion had sworn to take no face from the women outside, but his mind still tried to bring traces from the world he had rejected. So the face was born slowly, not from the noise of Cyprus, but from the inner silence he fought to protect. On the third day, Damas came and found less progress than he expected. The old master looked at the fine dust beside the ivory and understood that Pygmalion had worked a great deal, but had cut very little. "If you carve with this much caution," he said, "the material is not afraid of you. You are afraid of the material." Pygmalion did not raise his head. Fear sometimes keeps the hand clean. Damas did not like the answer. "No," he said. "Sometimes it only delays the hand." A short but hard silence stood between them. Minos thought both men might be right. Without Pygmalion's extreme care, this face would not be born. Yet every delay was turning the ivory into less of a work and more of an obsession. Before he left, Damas gave a small piece of news. People in the city were saying Pygmalion had closed his door to all living models. Some called him holy, others mad. Pygmalion only shrugged. But the news mattered. The eyes of the world outside had come near the workshop. From then on, his work became not only an inward act, but also an answer to rumor. On the fifth night, the face appeared. Pygmalion did not stop because he found it beautiful. He stopped because it had become too clear to keep hiding. The lips held neither a full smile nor sorrow. The eyelids carried the weight not of someone about to wake, but of someone who had not yet left a dream. The face his master had made did not resemble any woman he had seen, yet it was not distant, like a pure fantasy. It seemed as if, after all human faces had been refused, the remaining possibility had settled into the ivory like a faint breath. Pygmalion saw the apprentice's wonder and said sharply, "Do not look." Minos flinched. "Why?" Pygmalion took time to answer. He did not know the reason himself. Perhaps he did not want the face to be lessened by another gaze. Perhaps he was not ready to share it. "Not yet," he said at last. The words reminded him of Thalia's warning, and that made him uneasy. He turned back to work. The first true interruption from outside came that day. Two young priestesses came from the temple with Thalia's greeting. Pygmalion tried to stop them at the door, but they said they would speak without entering. There was news that one of the Propoetides had grown worse. People said her face lost more life each day as she sat in a shaded room. Thalia had wanted Pygmalion to know. "Why?" he asked. One of the young priestesses answered, "Because something is losing life, and something else is being born, and both are being spoken of in the same days." The words angered him. He did not want the face in ivory to be seen as the opposite of a curse. Still, the news changed the air in the workshop. The figure he was making must not resemble that shadow of hardening. Its silence must not be emptiness. It must be waiting. In this way, the dark sign from the city changed the direction of the work. Pygmalion was no longer searching only for perfection. He was searching for a stillness that was different from a fall. The hands took almost as long as the face. Pygmalion did not make the fingers simply fine and graceful. He shaped them as hands that did not know how to touch yet, but thought before touching. That choice surprised him. His own hands had spent years forming, cutting, correcting, and ruling. The hands in the ivory seemed to show that one could approach something without owning it. Minos noticed and said, "Master, the hands do not look like yours." Pygmalion paused. "They should not," he answered. It sounded like a secret confession. Pygmalion did not close the window. The sound of drops falling into the stone courtyard mixed with the delicate strikes of the chisel. For the first time, the work held not only silence but also a soft rhythm from the world outside. The rhythm did not make the ivory body seem alive, but Pygmalion's hand sensed dimly that beauty might be incomplete if the world were locked out entirely. As the statue neared completion, Pygmalion's behavior changed. In the past, he examined his works from a careful distance, looked for faults, corrected them, and covered them. Now he often stepped back, then approached again, as if called. Sometimes his lips moved, but no sound came. One evening, Minos found him standing before the figure for a long time. There was no victory in Pygmalion's face. There was the pale attention of a man afraid of what he had made. When Damas came the next morning and saw the work, he spoke very little. The old master could not hide his admiration, but it was mixed with unease. "This does not look human," he said. Pygmalion's face tightened. "Less than human?" he asked. Damas shook his head. "No, perhaps more." He had fled from human flaws. He had not considered that a beauty beyond humanity might call his heart into a greater trial. On the final night, Pygmalion put down all his tools. The statue stood in the middle of the workshop. It had no name, no voice, no warmth. Yet when the light fell upon its face, the silence seemed chosen rather than empty. Pygmalion did not go close. He stood by the door and for the first time felt fear rather than comfort that the work was complete. What had been completed no longer belonged fully to his hand. It now stood before him as the possibility of a separate being. Minos watched from the back room and wondered if his master would speak. At last Pygmalion said very softly, "You were not born. I remembered you." The statue did not answer, yet its silence no longer seemed to him only lifeless. It was as if Somewhere behind a door not yet opened, the echo of those words had been stored. As the lamps lowered one by one, Pygmalion stayed awake before his own work, afraid not of sleeplessness, but of the fact that it did not wake. The next morning, Pygmalion tried not to look at the statue. He arranged his tools, opened old commission books, gave Minos unnecessary tasks, and told him to count the broken bases in the courtyard. But every movement brought him back to the center of the workshop, to the silent figure born from ivory. When the eastern sun rose and touched its face, the lips showed a softness he had not seen the night before. Pygmalion told himself it was only a play of light. Still, his hand moved toward it without his permission. He stopped his fingers a few inches from the cheek, afraid that if he touched it, he would prove his own lie. Minos saw his hesitation. To admire a work was easy. To search for an answer inside its silence made a man foolish and defenseless. Pygmalion feared becoming foolish. The pride he had protected by judging the world outside was beginning to crack inside his own workshop before a face made by his own hands. The first days passed through small trespasses. Pygmalion cleaned the dust around the figure and told himself this was ordinary care for any work. He removed fine shavings from its shoulders and told himself this was discipline. One night, when wind entered through the door, he placed a thin cloth over the statue. "Ivory does not feel cold," he said to himself. Still, he did not remove the cloth. The next morning, Minos saw it and asked nothing. The young apprentice's silence was heavier than an open question. In the afternoon, Pygmalion spoke to the statue for the first time. It was not the voice of a commanding master. It was lower, almost ashamed. He did not tell it why he looked, why he felt guilty, or why he had fled from all human faces only to take refuge in a face again. He said only, "Your being here changes the balance of the room." The center of the workshop was no longer himself. It was that unanswered presence. Rumors grew in the city. A client came to the door to see Pygmalion's new work, and Minos turned him away. Then 2 young men joked that the sculptor no longer worked for anyone and had locked himself inside his own dream. When these words reached Pygmalion, he felt an unexpected anger. He could not bear to hear his work made small in other people's mouths. Yet the rumor also revealed the truth inside him. He was not only protecting the statue, he was jealous of it. Jealousy for a lifeless thing was as dangerous as love. To avoid thinking about it, Pygmalion placed a small seashell at the foot of the statue. Then he could not explain why he had done it. As Ovid tells, the gifts began to come one by one: colored stones, little feathers, flowers, and fine cloths. After every gift, Pygmalion found a new excuse for himself. But the more excuses he found, the clearer the truth became. He was no longer tied only to his art. He was tied to the woman he imagined in the place where his art fell silent. One evening, Thalia came without warning. The door was locked. Minos hesitated before opening it, but the priestess's calm firmness could not be refused. When Thalia entered the workshop, she saw the gifts around the statue. She did not touch any of them. Pygmalion's face darkened. He felt as if he had been caught. The priestess said, "The festival of the goddess is only a few days away. The city is preparing its wishes." Pygmalion answered sharply, "I have no wish." Thalea's eyes moved from the statue to him. A man without a wish does not leave flowers for a silent form. He could not even find words for a lie. Thalea looked at the statue for a long time. She saw not only skill, but a dangerous waiting. "If you love her only because she is silent," she said, "then you love not her, but your own fear." Pygmalion did not want to hear this, but after she left, he looked at the gifts and admitted for the first time that they held helplessness as much as love. The storm came that night. Wind pressed against the courtyard door, and rain ran from the roof in thin lines. While Minos tried to protect the lamps in the back room, Pygmalion adjusted the cloth at the statue's head. When lightning flashed, the ivory face seemed alive for one brief moment. He drew back. Then he moved closer and began to speak without looking at the coldness of its lips. He spoke of the city, the laughter of the Propoetides, the words of Thalea, and the warnings of Damas. He began as if defending himself, but then his voice broke. "I did not choose you," he said. "I could not escape you." With those words, he felt a door open inside him. The statue did not answer. Its silence was no longer comfort. It hurt. For the first time, Pygmalion understood that the thing he loved could not answer him, and this was not safety. He brought his hand to the statue's hand. The ivory was cold. Still, he did not pull away at once. By morning, he had given it a name. At first, he did not say it aloud. As he changed the flowers, straightened the cloth, and moved the shells aside, several names appeared in his mind and disappeared. None fit. Toward noon, when the light from the sea filled the room, he said, "Galatea." The name settled into the workshop as if it had always belonged there. Minos heard it from the doorway, and the softness on his master's face frightened him. Pygmalion was no longer only admiring. To give a name went beyond admiration. Minos asked, "Master, is this good?" Pygmalion did not grow angry. "I do not know," he said. Pygmalion was not a man who admitted he did not know. Before him there was no longer a work, there was a name waiting for an answer. On the night before the festival, Pygmalion placed Galatea on a low bed covered with purple cloth. The fabric, dyed in the color of Tyre, made the whiteness of the ivory even more clear. Someone looking from outside might have called the act madness, and Pygmalion knew it. For that reason, he sent Minos away early, closed the doors, and left the lamps only around the bed. He placed small shells at her head and roses at her feet. Then he stepped back. The beauty before him no longer made him glad. It made his knees weaken with a sense of loss. Everything was complete except life. He could give a face, a hand, a posture. He could not give breath. As the night grew deeper, he knelt beside the bed. He did not pray yet. He only waited in silence. For the first time, his waiting made room for a power greater than his own hands. On the day before the festival morning, the temple road came alive early. Priestesses washed seashells. Young girls sorted flowers. Old women wrapped offering bread in cloth. The city's movement reached even Pygmalion's closed workshop. Minos brought the news. One of the Propoetides no longer appeared in the square, people said. She sat in a shaded room, and the strange stillness in her face had deepened. At the same time, people were whispering about Pygmalion's work. Some said he was making a secret statue for Aphrodite. Some said he now hated all living women. Others said he had carved a bride from ivory. Galatea was no longer only the secret of the workshop. The outside world had begun to build meanings around her, even through locked doors. For that reason, Pygmalion felt the call of the festival more heavily. To go to the goddess would mean more than presenting a wish. It would mean naming the truth he had hidden. Thalia came in the afternoon and did not wait at the door. She gently passed Mimos's uncertainty and entered. When she saw Galatea on the bed among the purple cloths, her face showed neither surprise nor mockery. That measured silence left Pygmalion more exposed. The priestess asked, "What do you want for her?" Pygmalion did not answer at once. It was no longer possible to say nothing. He could have said, "I want her to live," but that would have placed him in the middle of a divine request. Thalia stepped closer. "If you love something, you must not want it to remain only inside your dream. You must want it to exist apart from you." Pygmalion's face tightened. "What if it changes when it exists?" The priestess answered, "Then you loved its stillness, not her." The words were sharp, but they did not shout. For a moment, all his defenses went silent. He began to understand that while he wanted Galatea to come to life, he also wanted her to remain as he imagined her. Perhaps Aphrodite's true test would begin only after the wish was granted. Damas came that same day. The old master looked at Galatea for a long time and said nothing. Her beauty affected him, but the exhausted devotion in Pygmalion's face troubled him more. "This has become more than your work," he said. Pygmalion answered, "Yes." Damas said, "Then it is more dangerous." This time Pygmalion did not argue. The old man sat down and placed his hands on his knees. "An artist loves what he makes, but if what he makes begins to rule him, the chisel turns in his hand." Pygmalion gave a tired smile. "The chisel is no use anymore." For the first time, Damas saw his student not only as proud but as helpless. He did not speak harshly. "If you love a thing," he said, "want it to exist, not to belong to you. Otherwise what you love becomes an ornament for your loneliness." These words resembled Thalia's, but in Damas's worn voice they sounded more earthly. Pygmalion lowered his head. Everyone had brought him to the same door. That door opened toward the goddess. As evening came, the smell of the festival fires reached the workshop. Incense, herbs, and resin traveled on the wind. Pygmalion opened the door. In the distance, the temple columns stood against the darkening sky. When he returned to Galatea's side, he could no longer see her only as Ivory, but he could not see her as living either. The hands that had given gifts, a name, and a covering now felt empty. Mimos quietly brought water. His face held not curiosity, but pity. "Will you go tomorrow?" he asked. Pygmalion did not answer for a long time. Then he said, "I do not know." Mimos replied softly, "If you do not go, you will still wait here." The simple words reached him more directly than any philosophical warning. It was true. Wherever he fled, he would return to Galatea's silence. Not going to the goddess would not destroy the wish. It would only keep it waiting in the dark. Pygmalion did not sleep. Outside, people who had come for the festival searched for places in the inns, and offering sellers made their final preparations in the streets. The workshop stood in the middle of all this movement, like a closed heart. Sitting at Galatea's head, he did not look at her for long stretches. He did not want to lose himself in her beauty. Instead, he looked at his hands. These hands had softened stone for years, brought forms into being, and created faces praised by others. Now they could do nothing. This helplessness first angered him, then it slowly made him humble. A man's knowledge of his own limit sometimes began before he reached a temple threshold. Pygmalion knelt beside Galatea without touching her cold hand. Not a woman who resembles you, he thought. A life that resembles you. His wish swayed between possession and the desire for another being to exist. The swaying wore him down, but it was honest. Near dawn, a small child sent by Thalia came and left a myrtle branch and a thin white thread at the door. Pygmalion took the branch, but he did not tie the thread around his wrist. Minos watched him. "The priestess knows you will come," he said. Pygmalion answered, "No, she only knows how to wait." There was no anger in the answer. There was the weariness of accepting that someone had understood his fear before he had. He returned to Galatea and placed the myrtle branch at the edge of the bed. If Galatea woke, she would not be a silent form anymore. She would have her own will. Perhaps she would not look at him. Perhaps she would be afraid. Perhaps she would not love him. The possibility was more frightening than the miracle itself. Still, he left the branch there. To want something despite fear was the first honest form of a wish. Just before sunrise, Pygmalion stood. He washed his face and scrubbed the stone dust from his hardened hands, but he put on no festival robe. He would go to the temple not as an artist, but as a man accepting his own insufficiency. He stood at Galatea's head. In the first pale light of morning, her face seemed farther away. "I will return," he said. He did not know whether the words were meant for her or for himself. Minos opened the door. Outside, the city was preparing for the festival morning, and early light trembled on the stones of the street. Pygmalion did not tie the white thread around his wrist. He held it in his palm. With every step, it tightened lightly between his fingers. It was as if the thing drawing him to the temple was not the call of the crowd, but an invisible bond created by the admission that his own hands were no longer enough. Behind him, the workshop door closed. Galatea remained silent. Yet her silence no longer seemed like emptiness. It felt like a deep threshold waiting for his decision. On the festival morning, the temple road was almost hidden by the crowd. People moved upward with flowers, cloth, fruit, dove cages, and small bowls of offerings in their hands. When Pygmalion entered the crowd, people acted as if they did not know he was the man who had refused the goddess's request only days before. But some eyes recognized him, and whispers moved in short waves. Minos was not with him. Pygmalion had wanted to walk this road alone. He wore his plain working clothes and carried no gold or precious gift. Only the white thread was wrapped in his palm, damp with sweat from his fingers. Along the road, he heard the shadow of the Propoetides again. In one corner of the square, people spoke of their condition, but no one dared use the word curse openly. The rumor made his wish heavier. In a city where life seemed to be leaving certain bodies, he was going to ask life for something lifeless. The contradiction deepened his shame, but he did not turn back. Thalia met him in the inner court of the temple. She looked at his face and understood that he had not come to argue, but to break. The great altar had been prepared, Incense rose into the sky. Priestesses kept silent order around the animals with gilded horns. People murmured their private wishes. As Pygmalion approached the altar, he felt small and bare. His fame, his works, and the skill of his hands were useless here. He was ashamed to say Galatea's name. To say, "Give me the woman I carved from ivory," would mean he still wanted her as something he had made. But to say, "Give me a wife who resembles my ivory girl," would be to hide the truth. Between these two sentences, his tongue locked. Thalea watched from a distance and did not help. Some prayers, if they borrow their words from another person, remain incomplete. Looking at the altar flames, Pygmalion accepted for the first time that his desire could be both innocent and selfish. At last he spoke. His voice did not come at first. Then it rose low, and it sounded too open even under the noise of the crowd. He told Aphrodite that he had feared the shrinking of beauty, that he had turned away from people, and that the silent form made by his own hands had brought him to a greater helplessness. He did not say Galatea's name, but he knew the goddess did not need to hear it. "Give me not only someone who fits my dream," he said. "If there is mercy in you, give that silent form her own life. Not an answer that resembles me, but a being that resembles herself." As he spoke, he feared the result of his own prayer. The living always wanted more than the dreamer expected. Around the altar, the priestesses lowered their heads. Thalea did not close her eyes. She looked straight at the flames. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the fire seemed to draw into itself and grow small. People thought it was the wind. Then it rose once, then a second time, then a third time, softer but more certain. Pygmalion felt his knees weaken. No applause rose from the crowd, because most people did not understand that the sign had been given to him. But Thalea understood. The calm on the priestess's face deepened. Pygmalion looked at her. She did not nod, and she did not smile. Her silence made the sign even heavier. The goddess's answer did not feel like a promise of happiness. When Pygmalion moved back from the altar, the crowd returned to its own prayers. As he left the temple, he tied the white thread around his wrist. The gesture was not ceremonial. It was a small seal by which he admitted he would not run. Outside, the air had changed. A hard wind came from the sea and blew flower petals across the stone steps. Pygmalion did not take the wind as farewell or blessing. He took it as urgency. The road back felt longer than the road to the temple. The city, still celebrating, now seemed to move behind a thin veil. Sellers called out. Children ran. Women carried empty baskets down from the altar, and men argued about omens. Pygmalion heard almost nothing. His mind had gone ahead of him to the closed workshop, the purple cloth, the cold ivory face. Several times he feared that he had misunderstood the sign. Perhaps the fire had risen for another prayer. Perhaps his own desire had turned a common movement into a divine answer. Then he remembered Thalea's silence. It had not comforted him, it had confirmed him. At the foot of the street, he saw Damas waiting. The old master did not ask what had happened. He looked at the white thread on Pygmalion's wrist and said only, "Then go slowly." Pygmalion wanted to rush past him, but Damas caught his arm. "A miracle is not a tool," he said. "Do not reach for it like one." The warning held him for one breath. Then he moved on. At the workshop, Minos opened the door before Pygmalion knocked. The boy's face was pale, as if he had spent the whole morning listening to the silence inside. "Nothing changed," he whispered. Pygmalion did not know whether the words were relief or grief. He entered slowly. The lamps had been kept low. The purple cloth lay smooth around Galatea. The myrtle branch still rested beside her. The room smelled of wax, old flowers, and rain left from the storm. Pygmalion approached the bed. Every step took effort. After the altar, after the rising fire, after the wind and the road, he had expected the air to tremble. It did not. Galatea was as still as before. Her face held the same white silence. Pygmalion stood beside her and did not touch her at once. He was afraid that if he did, the whole sign would fall apart. Minos remained by the door. The young apprentice did not move. At last, Pygmalion touched Galatea's hand. Nothing happened. The ivory was cold. He waited. Still nothing. His throat closed. He touched her wrist, then her cheek, then the line of her lips, as if life might be hiding in one place and not another. There was no warmth, no softness, no movement. The first blow was not rage, but shame. He pulled his hand back and stepped away, unable to look at Minos. The fire had risen 3 times, yet the workshop had not changed. He wondered whether Aphrodite had understood him and refused him, or whether she had answered by showing him the full emptiness of his desire. Minos whispered his name, but Pygmalion did not answer. He went back to Galatea and knelt beside her. He lowered his forehead near her cold hand and stayed there. The silence did not end. It deepened. When Pygmalion first noticed the warmth, he thought it was his own breath returning to him. He had stayed beside Galatea for so long that his body no longer knew where his heat ended and the cold of the room began. Minos had withdrawn to the shadow of the doorway, afraid to move. The lamps burned with a narrow, patient light. Pygmalion's forehead had been close to Galatea's hand, and when he lifted his head, his lips brushed her fingers. They were still cold, but not with the same clear coldness as before. He froze. The mind, once wounded by hope, can become cruel to itself. It looks for proof and fears finding it. He touched the fingers again. Nothing obvious moved, yet something in the hardness seemed less absolute. He drew his hand back as if he had been burned. Then he returned, slowly. The ivory did not become flesh in one sudden act. It first became uncertain, and that uncertainty was more frightening than any miracle. The change moved like dawn under a closed door. The fingers did not bend, but their edges lost a little of their carved sharpness. The lips, which had held the pale silence of ivory, received the faintest color, as if a hidden rose had been placed far beneath the surface. Pygmalion did not breathe. Minos took one step forward and stopped. On the cheek, the white seemed to deepen, not darken, as if the material were accepting light differently. Pygmalion remembered the old image told by poets, of wax softening in the sun. But this was slower than wax and more secret than sunlight. It did not melt. It yielded. He placed his thumb lightly on Galatea's wrist. At first, there was only stillness. Then something touched him from beneath. One beat, so slight that it might have been imagined. He pressed too hard and lost it. Panic rose in him. He softened his touch and waited. There it was again, a pulse, a small answer moving under what had been ivory. He whispered her name, and the name no longer seemed to fall against a wall. It entered the air between them and remained there. Galatea's chest rose so faintly that Pygmalion thought the lamp flame had deceived him. Then it happened again. A first breath does not always arrive as a great sound. Sometimes it is only a quiet agreement between body and world. The purple cloth shifted. Minos covered his mouth with both hands. Pygmalion wanted to laugh, cry, and flee at the same time. He had asked for life, but when life began, it did not feel like possession. It felt like a door opening from the other side. Galatea's eyelids moved. The motion was smaller than a falling petal, yet it changed the whole room. Pygmalion stepped back. For the first time since he had carved her, he did not want to stand too close. The being before him was no longer something he could examine. She was arriving. Galatea's first awareness was not thought, but weight. Something held her. Something pulled her downward. Then light touched her through closed lids, and sound came from every side without shape. A low cry, a quick breath, the small crackle of lamps, the far sea beyond walls. She had no names for any of these things. Her body was not yet familiar to her. Fingers were separate and together. Air entered and left her, and each breath surprised her. She opened her eyes. The first thing she saw was not Pygmalion's face clearly, but brightness around him. Then his features formed, a man with dust at his cuffs, sleepless shadows under his eyes, and a fear so naked that it softened him. She looked past him and saw the upper part of the open window. Beyond it, a thin piece of sky. Her gaze moved between the man and the sky, as if both had equal claim on her first moment. Pygmalion understood this, and it hurt him in a way he could not name. She tried to speak, but no word came. Her throat learned sound before language. A rough, small breath escaped her, and she closed her eyes again, startled by herself. Pygmalion moved forward, then stopped. Thalea's voice, Damas's warning, and Mimos's simple truth all stood between his hand and her shoulder. "Do not be afraid," he said. The words were meant for her, but they were also meant for himself. Galatea opened her eyes again. Her face did not hold the calm he had carved. It held confusion, pain, wonder, and the first fear of a being who had not chosen to enter the world and yet now had to live in it. The living face was less perfect than the carved one. It was also more beautiful. Mimos began to cry silently by the door. Pygmalion heard him but did not turn. The whole workshop seemed to be learning how to breathe with her. Thalia arrived before night fully fell. Mimos had run to the temple as soon as he could move. The priestess entered without haste, but the stillness in her face showed she understood the weight of the hour. Galatea sat upright now, wrapped in a plain cloth, her hands trembling in her lap. Her eyes followed every movement. Thalea did not kneel before her as before a goddess, and she did not inspect her as a marvel. She sat at a respectful distance and said her own name first. "I am Thalea." Galatea listened to the sound. Pygmalion stood beside the wall, pale and silent. He wanted to tell the story, to explain the prayer, the statue, the altar, the fire. Thalea stopped him with a glance. "Let her meet the world one word at a time," she said. Galatea touched her own chest with uncertain fingers. Pygmalion whispered, "Galatea." She heard the name, but she did not repeat it. The name rested before her like a cup she had not yet chosen to lift. Night came with no simple joy. The miracle had happened, but happiness did not fill the room in an easy way. Galatea looked at Pygmalion with the gaze of someone who saw his need before she understood his love. That need frightened her. She was alive, and the first thing life showed her was a man who had waited too much from her silence. Pygmalion understood only a piece of this, but the piece was enough to still him. When Minos brought water, Galatea flinched at the shine of the bowl. When Thalia touched the cloth near her hand, she studied the movement before allowing it. Every small act had to be learned. Pygmalion wanted to help, but help itself could become another form of control. So he stood back. He said her name once more, softer this time. Galatea turned toward him. Her lips moved. No word came. The name stayed between them, unanswered, and because it was unanswered, it became real. When morning light entered the room, Galatea opened her eyes as if the world had begun again. The first night had been broken by fear, short sleep, and the strange labor of breathing. Now the air seemed clearer. She lay still, not because she was a statue, but because every movement required trust. The cloth on her skin felt at once gentle and heavy. The light at the window hurt her eyes, yet she kept looking at it. Pygmalion had not slept. He sat far from the bed, with his hands folded so tightly that the knuckles had turned pale. He had spent the night learning not to approach her whenever she moved. Thalia entered quietly with water, bread, and a small bowl of honey. She placed them within reach, not in Galatea's hands. "The body learns by meeting things," she said. "Let her meet them." Pygmalion nodded. Galatea looked at the water first. Its surface shook with the movement of the room, and she watched it as if it were a living eye. Thalia dipped her own fingers into the bowl and lifted them. Drops fell back with soft sounds. Galatea copied her slowly. The water closed around her fingers and released them again. She drew a sharp breath. Touch surprised her more than sight. It changed and vanished, but it left knowledge behind. She touched the cloth, the edge of the bed, her own wrist, and then the air. Each contact made the world larger. Pygmalion wanted to tell her the names of things. He wanted to give order. But Thalia shook her head slightly. "Too many names can become another cage," she said. So he waited. When Galatea tasted honey, her face changed with such open surprise that Minos, standing by the door, laughed before he could stop himself. Galatea turned toward the sound. She did not understand laughter yet, but she understood that it did not harm her. A faint answer appeared at the edge of her own mouth. It was not the calm smile Pygmalion had carved. It was uneven, uncertain, and alive. By midday, Galatea tried to stand. Pygmalion moved forward by instinct, but he stopped when she looked at him. That look was not rejection. It was a request to let her discover the ground. Thalia stood on one side, Minos on the other, close enough to help, but not close enough to seize. Galatea placed one foot on the floor. The cold stone shocked her. She almost sat down again. Then she tried once more. Her body, which had looked so perfectly balanced in ivory, now learned balance through failure. The first step was small, the second uncertain, the third stronger. Pygmalion watched with a pain he had not expected. As a statue, she had seemed beyond the world. As a living woman, she could stumble. Yet every stumble gave her more truth. Minos whispered, "She is walking." Pygmalion did not answer. His eyes were full. He had prayed for life, but he had not imagined that life would begin with awkwardness. In the afternoon, Thalia brought a polished bronze mirror. Pygmalion stiffened. The mirror had belonged to the world he mistrusted: vanity, comparison, desire. But Thalia held it without ceremony and placed it before Galatea. At first, Galatea did not understand. She saw another woman and looked behind the mirror to find her. Minos almost smiled, then controlled himself. Thalia turned the mirror gently until Galatea saw the movement of her own hand reflected. Galatea grew very still. She touched her cheek. The woman in the mirror touched hers. Pygmalion felt a deep fear rise in him. The face he had made was now looking at itself without him. Galatea studied her own eyes for a long time. Then she turned toward Pygmalion. "Me?" she asked. The word was rough, incomplete, but it was a word. Pygmalion nearly stepped forward, but Thalia's gaze held him back. "Yes," he said. "You." Galatea looked again into the mirror, and the word settled inside her like the first stone of a house. Later she asked, "Who was I?" The question came slowly, built from fragments Thalia had taught her. Pygmalion felt the room narrow. He wanted to say, "I made you." The sentence rose to his mouth because it had been true in the way a hand speaks of what it shapes. But it was not large enough for the woman before him. If he said it, he would reduce her first question to his own pride. He said instead, "I found you." Galatea listened. The answer did not satisfy her, but it did not wound her as much as the other one might have. "Where?" she asked. Pygmalion looked at his hands. "In the ivory," he said, then added, "and in my longing." Thalia watched him closely. It was not a perfect answer. It still held too much of him, yet it was more honest than possession. Galatea touched her wrist again, as if searching for where old silence ended and new life began. "I was quiet," she said. "Yes," Pygmalion answered. "You were quiet." She looked at him with sudden seriousness. "Now I hear." That evening, Minos brought a small piece of bread and showed her how to break it. The simple act became an event. Galatea pressed too hard at first and crushed part of it in her fingers. Crumbs fell into her lap. She looked startled, then looked to Pygmalion as if expecting judgment. He did not correct her. Instead, he picked up a crumb and placed it in his own mouth, showing that broken things were not always failure. Galatea copied him. A small peace entered the room. The day had been filled not with great revelations, but with touch, taste, balance, and names. Pygmalion saw that life did not arrive as a completed statue. It came as a series of attempts. When Galatea grew tired, she sat by the window. The sky outside had begun to turn violet. She did not ask to whom it belonged. She simply looked. Pygmalion stayed far enough away that her looking could remain her own. Before night, Galatea stood at the workshop door. The street beyond was dim, and the city sounds came in softened layers. Wheels, animals, voices, the distant sea. Pygmalion felt fear wake in him. Outside, people would stare, speak, claim, misunderstand. He wanted to close the door before the world touched her. But Galatea lifted her hand and placed it on the wood. She did not push it open yet. She only felt its surface. "There?" she asked. Thalia answered, "There is the world." Galatea looked at Pygmalion. He could have said no. He could have called it protection. Instead, he swallowed and said, "Not tonight." Then, after a pause, he added, "Tomorrow, if you wish." Galatea did not smile, but the hand on the door relaxed. It was enough. The first morning of her life had not ended with certainty. It ended with a door, a wish not yet used, and a man beginning to understand that love could not be proven by keeping her inside. The next morning, Galatea crossed the threshold. The act was small, but it did not feel small to anyone who watched. Pygmalion walked one step behind her. Minos stood at the doorway and saw how hard that distance was for his master. Galatea took the outside air with her whole body. The sense of the workshop had been limited. Here, the sea, bread, animals, wet rope, flowers, and dust all mixed together. Each smell brought a different message, and every sound opened a new direction. As she turned her head, fear stirred inside Pygmalion. He wanted to call her back, but Thalea's words remained in his mind. To exist was not to be hidden inside another person's gaze. So he stayed silent. When Galatea passed through the courtyard gate and into the street, two children saw her and stopped. One of them almost smiled, then fell quiet at his mother's sign. Galatea noticed the silence. She was beginning to understand that the world was looking at her. When they reached the marketplace, the city received her in whispers. Women watched from behind fruit stalls. Fishermen slowed their work. Some young men tried to dress their curiosity as respect. Pygmalion was ready to see every glance as a threat. Galatea saw that not all glances were the same. One held fear, another wonder, another doubt, and another only a simple effort to understand. An old seller held out a fig. Galatea looked at Pygmalion and realized she was waiting for permission. The discovery troubled her. Then she reached out with her own hand and took the fruit. When she tasted it, her face changed. Pygmalion could not bear to watch every response of hers become a public event. "Let us go back," he said. Galatea looked at him. This time her words were clear. "No." It was the first open refusal. Short, hard, and necessary. Pygmalion stepped back. In the middle of the city, he began to learn that her existence was wider than his fear. On the temple road, Thalea met them. The priestess did not stop the crowd from coming near, but she allowed no one to touch Galatea. "Looking is one thing," she told those around them. "Claiming is another." The sentence seemed meant for Pygmalion as well. When Galatea entered the shade of the columns, she lifted her face. The temple felt both familiar and strange. Her life had been asked for there, but her body had awakened in the workshop. Thalea spoke the name of Aphrodite. Galatea repeated it, and her voice broke. She did not understand the goddess, but she felt that some mark of her lived within her own existence. Just then, two women spoke of the Propoetides. One of them, they said, could no longer look into mirrors, and her face carried a strange stillness. Galatea heard the rumor and looked at Pygmalion. Her gaze caught the trace of his old judgment. He lowered his eyes in shame. Galatea was not only seeing admiration in the city, she was seeing fear, fall, and judgment, but she did not turn all of it into one sentence as Pygmalion had done. She began to sense that every face might hold a different story. When they went down to the shore, the wind was clearer. Galatea watched the waves strike the land. The movement of the water, always coming and going, held her attention. "It does not stop," she said. Pygmalion answered, "The sea does not stop." She turned to him. "And I?" The question caught him unprepared. Galatea was no longer only learning words. She was comparing herself to the motion of the world. "You do not have to stop either," he said. As he spoke, something painful loosened inside him. Once he had loved her stillness because it could not leave him. Now he was telling her she did not have to remain still. The sea gave the lesson better than any priestess. Galatea stepped closer to the water. When foam touched her feet, she drew back in surprise, then stepped forward again. Pygmalion did not stop her. He watched the water reach her and withdraw. He understood that contact did not always mean possession. Sometimes it meant return. By the time they came back through the market, the whispers had changed. People no longer spoke only of a statue come to life. They spoke of how she had tasted a fig, stood in sea foam, and said no to Pygmalion in the middle of the square. These small details traveled faster than any official announcement. Pygmalion disliked it at first. Then he realized that each story, though imperfect, moved Galatea farther away from being only his secret. Thalia walked beside her for part of the road. "They will misunderstand you," the priestess said. "Do not spend your whole life answering every misunderstanding." Galatea listened carefully. "Then what should I answer?" she asked. Thalia looked at Pygmalion before replying. "The ones that try to decide your life for you." Pygmalion heard the words and felt their weight. The day had not only introduced Galatea to the city, it had introduced the city to her will. The city could admire her, fear her, and speak about her, but it could not return her to silence. At the temple gate, an older official blocked their path. He was not rude, but his face carried the stiffness of someone who wanted order before truth. He asked Pygmalion to explain who Galatea was and whether the temple had confirmed the miracle. Pygmalion's first instinct was to answer for her. His mouth opened. Galatea touched his sleeve. The gesture was small, but it stopped him. She turned to the official. Her speech was still slow, but each word was chosen. "I am Galatea," she said. "I am learning." The official frowned as if this was not enough. For Pygmalion, it was more than enough. Thalia stepped beside Galatea and said, "The goddess does not need a clerk to confirm mercy." The official did not press further. Around them, people murmured. Pygmalion felt both pride and fear. Galatea had spoken for herself before the city. A new chapter of their conflict had begun in public. She was tired but not defeated. The city had touched her through eyes, voices, questions, and rumors. Pygmalion stood behind her, more restless than she was. "They will not leave you alone," he said. Galatea answered, "Then I will have to learn where I end." The sentence was simple, but it struck him deeply. He had spent years seeking the perfect boundary of form. Galatea was now speaking of the boundary of the self. Mimos listened from the back room and understood that the workshop was no longer the same place. It had become a home, a shelter, a question, and a place from which Galatea might leave whenever she needed the world. Outside, the city still whispered. Inside, Pygmalion realized that his old wish had brought not peace but relationship. Relationship was more difficult than beauty. It required listening after the work was finished. Galatea turned her face toward the night air, and he did not close the door. In the morning, Pygmalion waited near the door. Galatea was preparing to go out. She had gathered her hair loosely with her own hands. Even that small detail seemed new to him, because her body had begun to carry choices he had not made. "It is not right for you to go out today," he said. Galatea lowered her hand from her hair. "Who knows what is right?" Pygmalion answered. "The city does not understand you." Galatea said, "Do you?" The question made the tension of the previous night visible at once. Pygmalion wanted to defend himself. He was not hiding her, he was protecting her. He was not limiting her. He was keeping her away from the crowd. Yet all those words sounded incomplete, even to him. Galatea came closer. Her eyes held no anger. They held a tired openness. "Before you loved me, did you hear me?" she asked. "When you wanted me, did you think about what I might want?" Pygmalion's face went pale. The questions did not sound like accusations. They sounded like the first claim of someone learning to exist. Pygmalion's voice hardened when he answered, "I did not hurt you." Galatea tilted her head slightly. "Is harm only a raised hand?" The sentence gathered the warnings of Thaleia and Damas into one place. Pygmalion's old pride stood up inside him. "I made myself small before the goddess to ask life for you," he said. Galatea remained calm. "I carry that. But I am not only the result of your prayer." In that moment, Pygmalion saw for the first time that his wish could become a debt for Galatea. To ask life for someone did not give him the right to ask that life back. Mimos appeared at the door and had heard the argument. The young apprentice entered fearfully. "Master," he said, "you are not afraid of losing her. You are afraid of her changing." Pygmalion turned to him. Once he would have grown angry. Now he was silent. Mimos had pulled the simplest truth out of all the confusion. Galatea's change was proof that she existed. Pygmalion still measured existence by the possibility of loss. The argument changed direction in the afternoon when Thaleia came. The priestess heard from Galatea herself, not from Pygmalion, that Galatea wanted to go to the temple. Pygmalion objected at once. "There are rumors in the city." Thaleia answered, "Rumors grow faster in closed rooms." Galatea moved to the priestess's side. The small movement made the invisible line between her and Pygmalion visible for the first time. "I want to spend one night in the temple," Galatea said. Pygmalion heard it as abandonment. His face darkened. "Why?" Galatea chose her words carefully. "Because I cannot hear my own voice inside your fear." There was no anger in the answer, but there was a need that could not be undone. Thaleia looked at Pygmalion. "If you want her to return to you, you must first let her be able to go." His hands trembled. He was caught between the possibility of losing Galatea and the truth that if he held her, he would lose her anyway. Choosing between those two was harder than praying at the temple. As Galatea prepared to leave, every object became heavy. Mimos brought her a plain covering, and Thaleia prepared a small lamp for the road. Galatea stood before the mirror, but this time she did not look at her face with fear. Pygmalion looked at her reflection, and understood that the Galatea of the first morning and the woman before him were not the same. Very little time had passed, yet her face now carried decisions, questions, and a new weariness. He wanted to tell her to be careful. He wanted to tell her not to believe the city. He wanted to tell her that he had not meant to make her feel trapped, but each sentence seemed to turn back toward him. So he said only, "Will you come back?" Galatea looked at him in the mirror first, then turned. "I do not know yet." It was not a cruel answer. It was an honest one. Pygmalion felt that honesty like cold water. He had asked Aphrodite for life. Life was now answering him with uncertainty. They walked to the temple before evening. Pygmalion came only as far as the lower steps. Thalea did not ask him to go farther. Galatea stopped and turned to him. In the fading light, her face seemed less like the ivory he had once carved, and more like someone shaped by every question she had survived since waking. Pygmalion wanted to touch her hand. He did not. Galatea noticed the effort. For the first time that day, a trace of softness moved across her face. "I am not leaving to punish you," she said. "I am leaving so I can hear myself." Pygmalion lowered his head. "I know." He did not fully know, but he wanted to. Galatea followed Thalea into the temple. The doors did not close loudly. That made it worse. A quiet closing leaves more room for thought. Pygmalion stood on the steps until the last light disappeared from the columns. Then he turned back toward the workshop alone. The workshop felt different without her. It was not the old silence of the statue. This absence asked everything. Pygmalion looked at the empty place by the window, at the folded cloth she had not taken, at the small bowl she had used that morning. None of these things belonged to him in the old way. They were traces of choices made by someone else. Mimos stayed near the door, unsure whether to speak. At last he said, "She may come back." Pygmalion answered, "She may not." The truth lay between them. The apprentice had no comfort for it. Pygmalion sat before the covered old studies. He did not uncover them. He did not work. He listened to the night outside and to the greater silence inside. For the first time he understood that waiting for a living person was different from waiting for a miracle. A miracle might come or not come. A person might choose. Late that night, Pygmalion took out the old gifts he had given Galatea before she came to life. The shells, flowers, stones, and cloths seemed smaller now. He had offered them to a silent form and called it love. He did not hate himself for it. Hatred would have been easier than understanding. He simply saw the incompleteness of it. He went to the place where Galatea had first stood at the door and touched the wood. Outside, the city was quiet. At the temple, she was waking or sleeping in a world not arranged by his hands. He wanted to go to her. He did not. That restraint was not noble yet. It hurt too much to be noble, but it was necessary. Near dawn, he sat on the floor with his back against the wall and closed his eyes. He did not ask the goddess to send Galatea back, not that night. He asked only for the strength not to turn his fear into a chain. It was the first prayer he had made that did not ask for possession. Galatea woke at dawn in the small room of the temple. The window was open, and the sea wind moved the edge of the curtain. The silence here was not like the first morning in Pygmalion's workshop. There, everything had seemed to look at her. Here, The world continued without waiting for her. At first, that difference felt like loneliness. Then it became relief. Thalia placed water at the door and did not come in at once. She allowed Galatea to wake by herself. Galatea reached for the bowl, washed her face, and left her fingers in the water for a long time. The water took the shape of her hand and immediately let it go. It gave her a quiet lesson. To touch was not to possess. When Thalia entered, Galatea's face held a calmer weariness than it had the night before. The priestess sat beside her without pressure. "You do not have to decide today," she said, "but if you define yourself only by how someone sees you, your own eyes open late." Galatea did not fully understand, but something heavy inside her shifted. Thalia took her to a small room behind the temple where polished bronze mirrors hung on the walls. Women who came to pray used them not only to arrange themselves, but to look honestly at their faces before making offerings. Galatea looked at the reflection before her. At first she thought she saw the shape Pygmalion had given her. Then she noticed something else in the eyes: tiredness, questions, fear, and a small resistance. Pygmalion had not carved these. They had been born from the days she had lived. Galatea leaned closer to the mirror and said, "Galatea." At first, the name had come in Pygmalion's voice. Now, it came from her own lips. The woman in the mirror gave it back. It was a quiet settling. Thalia made no ceremony of it. She only said, "A name is complete when you can carry it apart from the one who gave it." Galatea turned. A small statue of the goddess stood in the corner. Aphrodite's smile could not be read. Perhaps the greatest mercy of goddesses was that they did not answer in place of human beings. At the same hour, Pygmalion was alone in the workshop. The window seat where Galatea had sat was empty. At first, this absence troubled him more than the absence of the old statue. When the pedestal had been empty, he thought of the place of an object. Now he thought of a person's will. He opened the boxes where he had put away the old gifts: seashells, little stones, colored feathers, dried flowers. He had given none of them with cruelty. Still, each carried his wish to decorate his own loneliness. He sat at the table and looked at his hands for a long time. These hands had brought Galatea's face out of Ivory. They had not been able to keep her from leaving. Between sleep and waking, his head grew heavy. When his eyes closed, the old covered statues in the workshop opened one by one. All the figures he had made seemed to come alive, but none of them looked at him. Every face he had given turned in another direction and silently left the room. He wanted to call after them, but he had no voice. Pygmalion woke sweating. The dream was so strong that he checked whether the room had really emptied. Everything was in place, yet nothing looked the same. His old works no longer looked like success. They looked like half a way of seeing. When Damas came to the door, Pygmalion still carried the weight of the dream. The old master did not mock him. "She has not gone," he said. "She has only stepped out of your shadow." This time, Pygmalion did not defend himself. "Do I have the right to ask her to come back?" he asked. Damas answered, "You may ask a person to return. You may not make return the price of having loved her." Pygmalion lowered his head. Damas came farther into the room and looked at the old covered figures. "You once covered all these faces because you feared people would change," he said. "Now you must learn that change is the only proof that they live." Pygmalion listened. The listening was painful. but it was real. In the temple, Galatea spent the day between the mirror room, the small garden, and the quiet court, where women left offerings for Aphrodite. She saw a young bride pray not to be beautiful, but to be brave. She saw an old widow leave a comb that had belonged to her husband. She saw a mother ask not for love, but for patience. These wishes did not look like the selfish desires Pygmalion had once imagined everywhere. They were incomplete, yes, but they were human. Galatea began to understand that need did not always mean greed. Wanting could be humble too. In the afternoon, Thalia told her that she could stay in the temple if she wished. She could live under the protection of the goddess. No one would force her back to the workshop. Galatea listened to this carefully. The offer gave her peace, but also unease. If she stayed, she might be safe. But safety could become another form of stillness. She had awakened from ivory. She did not want to enter a softer kind of stone. As evening came, Galatea walked alone to the outer court and looked down toward the city. The workshop was hidden by rooftops, but she knew where it stood. Pygmalion was there, or perhaps somewhere on the road, fighting himself. She did not want to belong to his fear, but she did not want to deny the truth of what had passed between them either. He had loved wrongly, but not falsely. He had wanted her before he had hurt her, but now he was beginning to listen. That difference mattered. Galatea placed her hand on her chest and felt her own heartbeat. The rhythm was hers. It had been asked for by another, given by the goddess, and carried now by her own body. That made her neither object nor debt. It made her responsible. Thalia came to stand beside her. "You are thinking of returning," she said. Galatea answered, "I am thinking of choosing." The priestess smiled faintly. "Then the night has done its work." Pygmalion arrived at the temple just before dawn. He did not come with servants, gifts, or a demand. His clothes were plain, and his face showed a night without sleep. He stopped below the steps, as if afraid to cross a line he no longer had the right to cross. Thalia saw him and did not call Galatea at once. She watched him wait. He waited without knocking, without sending a message, without asking to be admitted. Galatea stood inside the columned passage and looked at him from a distance. He seemed smaller than in the workshop, not weaker but more human. Pygmalion lifted his eyes and saw her. He did not move toward her. He only said, "I did not come to bring you back." His voice shook. "I came because I owe you an apology." The words entered the morning air slowly. Galatea did not answer yet. The temple light grew around them. For the first time, the space between them did not feel like loss. It felt like room. The next day, Pygmalion came to the temple earlier, but he did not enter the court. He sat on the outer steps and waited. He carried no flowers and no gift. Only a small wooden ring was in his hand, carved through the night, not to give to Galatea, but to keep his hands busy while he waited. Even that small detail showed his change. Once waiting had seemed to him like wasted time. Now it was the space he opened for another person's will. Thalia saw him, came to his side, and asked no question. "You are less afraid today," she said. Pygmalion answered, "No, I am afraid, but I am trying not to let my fear decide." The priestess found this answer enough. When Galatea came out of the garden, she saw him like that. not standing with grand words, but sitting in the dust of the steps with a quiet effort. The sight did not erase her caution, but it made the space in which she could choose more real. Pygmalion no longer seemed like a door closing before her. He seemed like a man waiting at a threshold. She could stay in the temple. The priestesses could protect her, and the city might get used to her with time. If she wished, she could live in another house and make a life away from Pygmalion. These possibilities were spoken clearly. A choice could be real only if more than one path was possible. Galatea thought about each one. The safe calm of the temple drew her, but if she stayed there, she might be protected as a miracle and never tested as a human being. Returning to the workshop was not easy. When she thought of Pygmalion, she felt not only gratitude and not only pain. In him she saw labor, error, love, fear, and a will to learn. The mixture tired her, but life itself was like that. Thalea told her only one thing. Choose a road not because there is no pain there, but because you believe you can keep your voice on it. When they met in the court, Galatea spoke first. Today I want you to listen. Pygmalion lowered his head. I will listen. Galatea said she would not deny that her life had begun with his prayer, but that this did not mean she would live her life as a debt. You gave me the name Galatea, she said, but I will carry it. Pain and admiration appeared together in Pygmalion's face. Can you stay beside me knowing that? He asked. Galatea answered, I cannot stay on the days when you forget it. It was not a yes, but it was an open door. Thalea watched from a distance and kept city officials away. This conversation was no longer only private. It would shape how Cyprus understood the miracle. If Galatea were treated only as a gift given to Pygmalion, everyone would see her as someone's possession. If she declared her own choice, the mercy of the goddess would be understood more widely. Galatea knew this without needing it explained. I thought you were the answer to my loneliness, he said, but you are the beginning of your own life. The words did not make Galatea happy at once. True words do not remove the weight of the past in a single moment. Galatea came closer. I do not want to see you only through your fear, she said. I have seen that the hands that shaped me can also learn. The words shook him deeply. Galatea was not forgiving him because it was easy. She was naming the part of him that could change. Thalea stepped forward then. A choice made freely is heavier than any vow forced by gratitude, she said. If you join your lives, let no one in this city say that a woman was returned to the man who made her. Say that a woman chose the road on which she would keep speaking. The sentence moved through the court like a formal decree, but it remained deeply human. A small group had gathered at the edges of the court. The story of Galatea had already spread, and people wanted to know what would become of her. Some expected a wedding, some expected a temple sign, and some expected Pygmalion to claim what he had made. Instead, they saw two people speaking with care, and a priestess refusing to let the crowd turn the moment into a spectacle. Galatea turned toward the people. Her voice was stronger than it had been in the marketplace. I will go with Pygmalion, she said, but not because I belong to him. I go because I choose to see what we can become if he keeps listening and if I keep speaking. The words were simple, but they changed everything. Pygmalion closed his eyes for a moment, not in pride but in relief and fear together. The crowd murmured. Some understood, some did not. Thalea raised her hand and silence returned. Aphrodite had given life, but Galatea had given that life direction. The preparation for their union began without great noise. Thalea did not permit the city to seize the event for spectacle. No gold procession was called, and no grand public feast was announced. The ceremony would be held the next day at the open door of the workshop, where the miracle had first become daily life. Damas was told, and Minos ran ahead to prepare the space. Galatea walked back with Pygmalion, not behind him and not pulled by his hand. They walked side by side, with a little space between them. That space mattered. It was not distance, it was respect. On the road, people watched. Pygmalion's old instinct was to shield her with his body. He resisted. Galatea noticed. "You are learning slowly," she said. The sentence was not mockery. Pygmalion gave a faint, tired smile. "Stone was easier," he answered. Galatea looked toward the sea. Maybe that is why it could not live. He had no answer. He did not need one. At sunset, they returned to the temple for a small prayer before the union day. The altar was quiet now, almost empty after the festival. Thalea lit one lamp, not the great fire of the public ceremony. Galatea stood before the flame and did not ask for a sign. Pygmalion stood beside her and did not ask for a promise. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the lamp flame steadied. It did not leap high, and it did not blaze 3 times as before. It simply burned without wavering, even as wind moved through the court. Thalea watched it and said, "This is enough." Pygmalion understood. The first sign had answered a prayer for life. This sign did not create a miracle. It honored a choice. Galatea looked at the flame, then at Pygmalion. There was still fear between them, and there would be more to learn, but fear no longer stood alone. Beside it stood speech, consent, and the possibility of a love that did not need silence in order to survive. The union ceremony took place the next day at the open door of the workshop. Thalea did not want to move it to the great court of the temple. She believed the miracle should not be lost in the noise of a crowd, but should find its meaning at the threshold of ordinary life. The old pedestal in the middle of the workshop had been removed, and a simple bench had been placed near the door. The change looked small, but everyone understood it. Galatea would no longer be a form on display. She would be a person who could enter and leave. She wore a white linen dress with little decoration, and her face carried calm attention more than ceremonial weight. Pygmalion's hands were clean, but the calluses remained. He did not hide them. Thalea spoke the name of Aphrodite and asked the two not to promise ownership, but to promise that they would keep listening to each other. Pygmalion took Galatea's hand only when she offered it. The flame of the small lamp did not go out, even with the wind from the open door. The days after the ceremony passed through small lessons more than great events. Galatea tried to arrange her hair as she wished. Sometimes she failed, and sometimes she left it messy enough to make Minos laugh. When rain began, she stepped outside and noticed that Pygmalion was about to call her back. He stopped. Galatea stood in the rain for a long time, feeling the drops touch her skin, feeling her dress grow heavy and her hair cling to her face. Ivory did not know rain. Galatea could now receive the coolness of the sky with her own body. On another day in the marketplace, an old woman's basket fell. Galatea bent down and gathered the figs. When the woman's wrinkled hand touched hers, both paused. Galatea told Pygmalion about the hand when she returned home. That story changed the direction of his art. The workshop changed too. Once it had held only perfect foreheads, still lips, and measured shoulders. Now there were drawings of hands hardened by work, faces cracked by wind, tired mothers, fishermen returning from the sea, and mouths that lost their perfect shape when they laughed. Damas saw this and said nothing for a long time. Then he touched Pygmalion's shoulder. "You are no longer searching only for gods inside stone," he said. Pygmalion received the words not as praise but as a lesson learned late. Galatea also looked at his drawings sometimes. "This face has been silent too long," she would say, or "This hand has not dared to ask for anything." At first, Pygmalion was surprised by her comments. Then he understood that Galatea had changed not only his model, but his way of seeing. Mimos moved more easily in the new workshop. Spilled petals and crooked cloths were no longer treated like great flaws. Human life had entered the room. It was there with its disorder, its sounds, and its unexpected laughter. When the seasons turned, Galatea felt another rhythm in her body. At first she thought it was weariness. Then Thalia held her hands, and Galatea understood from the heavy joy in the priestess's face. A new life had begun inside her. Pygmalion did not know what to say when he heard. The being he had once known as lifeless had now become a doorway for another being. This thought did not make him proud. It made him smaller, because it showed him again how much larger life was than his hands. Galatea's pregnancy was not presented as an easy sweetness. Some mornings she was joyful. Some evenings she was afraid without a clear reason. Sometimes Pygmalion became too careful, offering help before it was asked. One day Galatea stopped him with a gentle but firm look. "Do not begin shaping me again while you are trying to protect me," she said. He accepted the words without defense. This too was love, not always knowing what to do but learning when to stop. Pygmalion made a cradle. He did not cover it with his own name or with symbols of artistic victory. He carved small shells, myrtle leaves, and a simple dove. When Galatea saw it, she ran her fingers over the marks. "Do you know who you made this for?" she asked. Pygmalion thought carefully. "To welcome him," he said. Galatea nodded. That answer was enough. Thalia visited often, not as a priestess controlling a miracle, but as a woman guarding a household through change. Damas brought smooth pieces of wood and pretended they were better than any Pygmalion could find. Mimos stayed busy, nervous and proud. The city spoke of the child before he was born. Some said he would carry the blessing of Aphrodite. Some said his name would one day belong to a sacred place. Galatea listened to these stories without letting them grow too large. She knew what it meant to be weighed down by other people's meanings. She wanted her child to begin not as a symbol but as a life, but as a... Paphos was born at dawn while the sea wind moved softly against the walls. There was fear in the house, but it was not destructive. It was the kind of fear that hovers near the unknown. Thalia and another priestess stayed with Galatea. Pygmalion waited in the outer room. The man who had once believed his hands could shape everything learned again how limited they were. No chisel, no prayer, no art, and no fame could hurry what was happening beyond the door. He could only wait, listen, breathe, and sometimes lean against the wall with his eyes closed. Then a thin sound rose from the inner room. The first cry of a child changed the meaning of every stone in the workshop. When Pygmalion was called inside, Galatea was tired, but her face was lit from within. In her arms was little Paphos. The child's face resembled no statue. His lines were uncertain, his movements irregular, his beauty beyond measurement. Pygmalion looked at him and did not search for perfection. For the first time he understood that an unformed life could already be whole. As Paphos grew, the sound of the house changed. The workshop held not only the taps of tools, but also the creak of the cradle, Galatea's low songs, and Mimos's foolish attempts to make the child laugh. The old place where the pedestal had stood was not left empty. A bench was set there, and visitors sat on it to rest and talk. The center of the room had become a place for people, not a place for display. Sometimes Pygmalion looked at it and remembered who he had been. He felt shame, but he did not turn that shame into punishment. He used it to stay awake. Galatea no longer denied that she had come from Ivory. Sometimes she touched the small box where a few old shavings were kept. She made peace with where she came from without letting it define her. One evening, Pygmalion made a tiny cradle ornament from an old piece of ivory. It was shaped like an opening shell, and its center was empty. Galatea looked at it and then at him. "You did not create me," she said. His hand trembled. She smiled gently. "But you saw me. Perhaps that is the greatest thing one person can give another." Night fell. Paphos slept, and the lamps in the house were lowered one by one. Galatea stood near the window and listened to the sea. Pygmalion came beside her, but he did not touch her shoulder at once. He waited until she turned slightly toward him. They both understood the value of that small permission. In the distance, the lights of Aphrodite's temple stood between the city and the sea, not too bright and not dim. Pygmalion no longer looked at Ivory and saw only cold perfection. He had learned to look with the same care at stone, skin, an old hand, a child's face, chosen silence, and the space another person needed. Galatea carried her name without the shadow of debt. Each time it was spoken from her lips, it belonged more fully to her. The wind lifted the curtain, the breathing of the sleeping child, the far temple flame, and the two people standing side by side entered the night of Cyprus as one quiet whole. As Paphos grew, the story of Pygmalion and Galatea was not told in Cyprus only as a miracle. At first, people spoke of the woman who had come to life from Ivory. Then they spoke of the fire that rose at Aphrodite's altar, of Galatea finding her own name in the temple mirrors, and of Pygmalion learning to wait at the door of his own workshop. But as the years passed, the heart of the story changed. People no longer asked only, "How did a statue come to life?" They began to whisper a harder question. When does a person truly begin to love the one they claim to love? When Pygmalion grew old, the most valuable work in his studio was not Galatea's statue. In truth, there was no statue left in the old sense. Instead, the walls were filled with drawings of aged hands, tired faces returning from the sea, small carvings that carried the laughter of children, and patterns from broken pots that had been repaired. The man who had once searched for perfection had finally learned that beauty did not live in flawless surfaces. It lived in what had been touched by time. Most of all, he learned this. It was easy to love something because it would never change. The harder thing was to stay beside someone while knowing they would change. Galatea in time became the quiet legend of Cyprus. When people saw her, they often wanted to say that she looked like a goddess. But she did not enjoy hearing that. She no longer wanted to be seen as a miracle. She wanted to be seen as a person. Sometimes she went to the temple and spoke with young women in the small room where the mirrors stood. She told them that beauty could be a gift, but if a person lived only through the eyes of others, they could slowly lose their own soul. Someone may say they love you, she would tell them, but you understand whether they truly love you by seeing whether they leave room for you to be yourself. When Paphos grew older, he heard the full story of his mother's awakening for the first time. There were parts his father had not been able to tell him for many years, because some regrets sit inside a person like stone before they become words. But one day, Galatea took her son to the shore and told him everything. She spoke of the ivory, the prayer, the fire, the first breath, the mirror, and the choice. Paphos stayed silent for a long time. Then he turned to his mother and asked, "So what makes a person human is not where they were born, but the path they choose for themselves?" Galatea smiled. "Yes," she said, "but choosing is not enough. You must earn the path you choose again every day." After that day, Paphos often looked at the empty pedestal in his father's workshop. Nothing stood there anymore. Not an ivory woman, not the face of a goddess, not a work that declared victory. There was only a simple bench where people sat. They rested there, talked there, and sometimes stayed silent there. To Paphos, that empty space became the strongest thing in the house. It reminded him that the greatest proof of love was not trapping someone at the center of your world. It was making room for them there, while still leaving a door open if they ever needed to walk through it. Years later, when this story was told to children in Cyprus, some of them still loved the miracle most. Their eyes grew wide when they heard how the statue's skin warmed, how blood began to move through her veins, and how her first breath filled the dim workshop. But those who listened more carefully noticed something else. The true miracle was not that ivory became flesh. The true miracle was that Pygmalion stopped trying to possess the one he loved and learned to hear her. Because stone coming to life was the mercy of a goddess, but a heart becoming soft was the trial of a human being.